She believes she's an enigma wrapped in mystery, a complex puzzle that no man could ever solve. She crafts her words carefully, controls her expressions, manages her image with the precision of a corporate marketing department. She thinks her inner world is protected by layers of sophisticated psychological armour that make her impossible to read. She's wrong. You were never as mysterious as you believed. Not to the men who understood the ancient art of human excavation. While you were busy perfecting your performance, they were studying the cracks in your facade. While you thought you were hiding your truth, it was bleeding through every gesture, every pause, every calculated response you believed made you unreadable. Today, I'm going to reveal the 18 darkest truths about female psychology that allow smart men to read women like open books. These aren't pleasant insights about human nature. They're surgical tools for dissecting the elaborate theatre of personality that women mistake for genuine mystery. Welcome to the uncomfortable reality of how easily the human soul can be decoded by those who know where to look. Walk through any social interaction between men and women, and you'll witness the greatest magic trick in human psychology. Women convincing themselves and others that they're impossible to understand. They speak in coded language, communicate through hints and implications, respond with carefully crafted ambiguity, then act surprised when men can't decipher their true meaning. This isn't because women are naturally more complex than men. It's because complexity has become their primary defense mechanism in a world that punishes authentic vulnerability. The elaborate psychological architecture that women construct around their true selves isn't mystery. It's camouflage designed to protect what they believe is too fragile to survive direct exposure. But camouflage only works when the observer doesn't understand the underlying patterns. Smart men have learned to see through the performance because they understand something most people miss. Human behaviour isn't random, it's predictable. Every defense mechanism, every emotional reaction, every carefully constructed persona follows patterns that can be decoded by anyone who knows the psychological grammar of human survival. The woman who seems impossible to read is actually screaming her truth in a language most men never learn to speak. Her mystery isn't genuine complexity. It's the elaborate symptom of fundamental fears that govern every interaction she has with the world. Every woman walking through life is simultaneously performing two full-time jobs, being herself and managing how others perceive her, being herself. This dual existence creates what psychologists call cognitive load, the exhausting mental burden of constant self-monitoring and image management that splits her attention between authenticity and acceptability. This performance exhaustion creates predictable weak points in her psychological armour. The mask slips during moments of stress, fatigue, surprise, or intense emotion. These micro moments of authentic response leak through her carefully maintained facade like water through hairline cracks in concrete. Smart men become archaeologists of these leaked moments. They don't try to penetrate the performance directly. They wait for the inevitable instances when the performance becomes too expensive to maintain. A genuine laugh that breaks through practiced composure, a flash of real anger that cuts through diplomatic politeness, a moment of actual vulnerability that pierces her constructed invulnerability. The reading process isn't about being smarter than her defences, it's about understanding that all defences have maintenance costs, and those costs create opportunities for observation that reveal far more than any direct questioning ever could. Women think their complexity protects them, but it actually betrays them. The more elaborate the performance, the more energy required to maintain it. The more energy required, the more moments of authentic response that slip through when that energy runs low. Human language wasn't designed for truth-telling, it was designed for survival. Every sentence a woman speaks serves dual purposes, conveying information and managing social risk. This creates a communication style where the actual message exists in the space between what's said and what's carefully avoided. Women have mastered the art of truth encryption. They embed their real thoughts in subtext, implications, tone, and timing rather than direct statement. Not because they're naturally deceptive, but because direct communication often carries social costs they're unwilling to pay. The result is a communication style that seems mysterious, but actually follows predictable patterns once you understand the underlying survival logic. The smart man reads between the lines because he understands that the lines themselves are often misdirection. When she says, "I'm fine," he hears the defensive wall being erected around something that definitely isn't fine. When she over-explains a simple decision, he recognizes the justification process that reveals internal conflict about that decision. This encrypted communication creates what appears to be female complexity, but is actually female strategy. She's not trying to be difficult to understand. She's trying to share information without accepting the vulnerability that comes with direct revelation. The encryption isn't random. It follows patterns based on what she fears revealing and what she needs to protect. Decoding female communication becomes simple once you realize that the most important information is always contained in what's conspicuously absent from what she's saying. The topics she avoids reveal more about her inner world than the topics she discusses. The emotions she won't express directly are always the ones driving her behavior indirectly. These 18 insights represent the fundamental patterns that govern female psychology beneath the surface of conscious awareness. They're not theories or speculation. They're observational tools refined through centuries of human behavioral study that reveal the predictable ways women leak their authentic selves despite their best efforts at concealment. Every woman you encounter is wearing psychological armor designed to make her acceptable to others while protecting her authentic self from potential rejection or judgment. This mask isn't deception, it's survival equipment for navigating a world that often punishes genuine vulnerability in women. The mask reveals itself through inconsistencies between performed emotions and micro-expressions, between stated preferences and unconscious behavior, between public persona and private moments of authenticity. Smart men read the mask by identifying these inconsistencies rather than trying to penetrate the performance directly. The woman who seems most put together is often wearing the heaviest armor. The more perfect the presentation, the more pain it's designed to hide. Perfect isn't human, and the pursuit of perfect reveals the deep insecurity about being seen as merely human. When a woman consistently criticizes specific traits in others, she's providing a roadmap to her own internal conflicts. The qualities she attacks most vehemently in other people are often the qualities she fears most in herself or has worked hardest to suppress in her own personality. This psychological projection works as an unconscious defense mechanism. By identifying and condemning these traits externally, she creates distance from having to acknowledge them internally. The criticism becomes a form of psychological exile, casting out parts of herself she can't accept. Smart men read projection by paying attention to the passion behind her judgments. Casual disapproval reveals preferences. Emotional disgust reveals internal warfare. The traits that trigger her strongest negative reactions are windows into the aspects of herself she's most afraid of confronting. Women often communicate their most important thoughts through what they don't say, rather than what they do say. Silence, pauses, topic changes, and deflections contain more valuable information than the actual words that fill the conversational space around them. When she becomes quiet during specific topics, when she changes the subject after certain questions, when she fills silence with nervous chatter, these moments reveal the emotional territories she's protecting. The intensity of her need to avoid certain subjects is directly proportional to their importance in her inner world. Smart men become students of female silence. They note what topics create discomfort, what questions trigger defensiveness, what subjects she returns to repeatedly, and what subjects she avoids completely. The pattern of avoidance creates a negative space outline of her authentic concerns and fears. Before a woman lies to others, she lies to herself. Self-deception serves as psychological anesthesia that allows her to function despite internal contradictions, unresolved conflicts, and uncomfortable truths about her own motivations and desires. This self-deception reveals itself through rationalization patterns. When she needs elaborate explanations for simple decisions, when she justifies behavior that contradicts her stated values, when she creates complex theories to explain away obvious patterns, she's showing you the internal conflicts she can't face directly. Reading self-deception requires recognizing the difference between explanation and rationalization. Explanation clarifies understanding. Rationalization creates comfort. The more comfort-seeking energy in her explanations, the more self-deception is operating beneath the surface. When a woman constantly identifies problems in her environment, relationships, or circumstances, she's unconsciously describing the internal landscape she inhabits. External criticism becomes a projection screen for internal distress that feels too dangerous to acknowledge directly. The woman who always notices what's wrong with others is telling you what feels wrong inside herself. The flaws she highlights in other people are often the flaws she fears others will discover in her. Criticism becomes a defensive strategy. Attack first to avoid being attacked. Smart men read chronic criticism as autobiography rather than objective assessment. They listen for the emotional signature behind the judgment to understand what internal pain is being expressed through external fault-finding. Excessive displays of confidence often mask profound internal insecurity. The woman who needs to constantly demonstrate her competence, success, or superiority is usually overcompensating for deep doubts about her actual worth or capabilities. True confidence is quiet because it doesn't need external validation. Performed confidence is loud because it's trying to convince both others and herself that the performance represents reality. The performance gap between projected confidence and authentic self-assurance creates observable inconsistencies. Reading confidence costumes involves looking for the effort behind the display. Natural confidence flows without conscious management. Artificial confidence requires constant maintenance, creating moments of exhaustion where the real insecurity bleeds through the performance. When a woman makes extreme claims about her feelings, experiences, or capabilities, she's often revealing the exact opposite of what she's proclaiming. Exaggeration serves as psychological overcompensation for internal doubts about the validity of her position. The woman who insists she's absolutely fine is usually anything but fine. The woman who claims she never gets jealous is often struggling with jealousy. The woman who proclaims she doesn't care what people think usually cares desperately about others' opinions. Smart men read exaggeration as fear signals rather than factual statements. The intensity of the claim reveals the intensity of the doubt it's designed to cover. The louder the proclamation, the deeper the insecurity it's masking. Women who need to micromanage their environment, relationships, or circumstances are usually dealing with internal chaos they can't directly address. External control becomes a proxy for the internal control they desperately want but can't achieve. This control compulsion reveals itself through perfectionism, over-planning, inability to delegate, anxiety about uncertain outcomes, and emotional dysregulation when things don't go according to plan. The need to control external variables increases proportionally with the internal variables that feel uncontrollable. Reading control compulsion involves recognizing that the need to manage everything external often indicates the inability to manage something internal. The specific areas where she demands control reveal the specific areas where she feels most powerless. When a woman makes loud displays of moral superiority, ethical judgment, or virtuous behavior, she's often unconsciously establishing hierarchy to manage her own guilt or shame about moral conflicts in her private life. Performed morality serves as psychological distance from moral inconsistencies that threaten her self-image. By positioning herself as ethically superior to others, she creates buffer space between her public persona and her private compromises. Smart men read moral performance by looking for the emotional investment in being seen as good, rather than the actual consistency of ethical behavior. True morality doesn't need advertisement. Performed morality requires constant publicity to maintain its psychological function. The fear that drives most female behavior isn't fear of being hurt, it's fear of being truly seen and subsequently rejected for who she authentically is beneath her carefully constructed presentation. This visibility terror creates elaborate systems of psychological protection designed to share selected aspects of herself while keeping her core identity safely hidden. The irony is that this protection often prevents the genuine connection she actually desires. Reading visibility terror involves recognizing the gap between what she shares and what she protects. The aspects of herself she guards most carefully are usually the aspects that contain her deepest truth and her greatest potential for authentic connection. Whatever a woman defends most passionately in conversation reveals what she doubts most deeply in her private moments. Defensive energy is always proportional to internal uncertainty about the thing being defended. This defensive pattern operates below conscious awareness. She doesn't realize that her need to justify, explain, or argue for certain positions betrays the internal questions she has about those same positions. Smart men read defensive intensity as doubt indicators rather than conviction indicators. The topics that trigger her strongest defensive responses are the topics where she's least certain of her actual beliefs or feelings. Women who need constant attention, validation, or recognition are often struggling with deep fears about being forgotten or becoming irrelevant. The need to be remembered masks the terror of being forgotten. This immortality anxiety drives attention-seeking behaviours that seem confident, but actually reveal profound insecurity about her lasting value or significance. The woman who needs to be the centre of attention is usually afraid of disappearing entirely. Reading immortality anxiety involves recognising the difference between wanting attention and needing attention. Wanting attention is preference. Needing attention is existential terror expressed through social behaviour. When a woman expresses hatred or contempt for someone, she's often experiencing envy that's too psychologically threatening to acknowledge directly. Hatred becomes the socially acceptable way to express the unacceptable feeling of wanting what someone else has. Envy disguised as moral judgment allows her to maintain psychological superiority while experiencing the inferior feelings that envy creates. The person she hates usually possesses something she desperately wants, but can't admit to wanting. Smart men read hatred intensity as potential envy indicators. The stronger the emotional reaction to someone else's success, beauty, or happiness, the more likely that reaction is rooted in wanting those same things for herself. Women don't speak from rational analysis. They speak from emotional wounds that shape how they interpret information and make decisions. What sounds like logical argument is usually pain finding intellectual justification for emotional positions. This pain-based reasoning creates predictable patterns in her thinking and decision-making that reveal the underlying emotional injuries driving her behaviour. The logic is secondary, the pain is primary. Reading pain-based logic involves listening for the emotional foundation beneath rational-sounding arguments. The position she holds most strongly usually protect her from re-experiencing specific emotional injuries from her past. Adult women unconsciously recreate childhood dynamics in their current relationships and circumstances. The patterns that shaped her early emotional development continue to operate as invisible templates for how she navigates adult interactions. This childhood replay happens automatically and below conscious awareness. She doesn't realise she's casting current people in roles from her developmental history, or that she's responding to present situations with emotional reactions learned decades earlier. Smart men read childhood patterns by looking for emotional responses that seem disproportionate to current circumstances. Overreactions usually indicate that past trauma is being triggered by present events. Women often hide uncertainty and confusion to avoid the social cost of appearing incompetent or lost. This concealment creates elaborate systems of pretending to know things they don't know and understand things that confuse them. The energy required to hide uncertainty creates stress that leaks through her behaviour in predictable ways. Overconfidence, deflection, topic changes, and information avoidance all serve as uncertainty concealment strategies. Reading uncertainty concealment involves recognising when her knowledge claims seem performed rather than natural. True knowledge doesn't need dramatic presentation. Hidden uncertainty requires constant management. Women who loudly proclaim their independence and self-sufficiency are often desperately seeking connection and support, but can't admit these needs without threatening their self-image as strong and capable. This independence performance creates the paradox of pushing away the very connection they crave while insisting they don't need what they're pushing away. The stronger the independence claims, the deeper the dependency needs being denied. Smart men read independence performance by looking for the effort behind the display. Natural independence is comfortable with occasional dependence. Performed independence treats any need for others as threat to identity. Every woman's behavioural patterns tell the story of her deepest fears, unresolved trauma, and unconscious strategies for psychological survival. These patterns aren't random. They're sophisticated adaptive responses to specific emotional injuries that continue to shape her adult behaviour. Pattern recognition reveals more about her inner world than direct questioning ever could, because patterns operate automatically and can't be consciously controlled or concealed. Her consistent responses to stress, conflict, intimacy, and challenge create a behavioural fingerprint of her psychological history. Smart men become students of pattern recognition rather than hoping for direct revelation. They understand that patterns are involuntary confessions that reveal the emotional programming running beneath conscious awareness. We live in an era of unprecedented psychological performance, where authentic human connection has been replaced by carefully curated personal brands designed to generate approval rather than genuine understanding. Every social media post, every casual conversation, every public interaction becomes another opportunity to manage impressions rather than share truth. Women have become master performers in this theatre of artificial authenticity, crafting personas so sophisticated that they often forget where the performance ends and their actual identity begins. The line between who they are and who they think they need to be has become so blurred that genuine self-knowledge becomes nearly impossible. This performance crisis creates a generation of women who are experts at seeming authentic while remaining fundamentally unknown even to themselves. They've become so skilled at giving others what they think is wanted that they've lost touch with what they actually want to give. The tragedy of the performance age isn't that women are being deceptive, it's that they're being deceptive to themselves first. The elaborate psychological theatre they create for others eventually becomes the prison they inhabit privately, trapped by personas that started as protective strategies but evolved into identity confusion. Smart men recognise that the performance isn't the enemy. It's a symptom of a culture that punishes authentic vulnerability while demanding the appearance of authenticity. The woman performing perfect happiness while struggling with depression isn't lying to deceive you. She's lying to survive in a world that has little patience for genuine human complexity. Despite all the psychological armour, behavioural management and emotional encryption that women deploy to protect their authentic selves, truth has an inevitable way of bleeding through the performance during moments when conscious control becomes too expensive to maintain. These leakage moments occur during stress, surprise, exhaustion, intense emotion, or when she forgets to monitor her presentation because something else demands her complete attention. In these microseconds of unguarded response, her authentic self surfaces before her protective systems can re-engage. Smart men become hunters of these authentic moments rather than trying to penetrate her defences directly. They understand that all psychological armour has weak points, and those weak points reveal themselves naturally during the course of genuine human interaction. The woman who seems impossible to read becomes an open book when you know how to recognise the moments when she stops reading herself. These moments of forgotten performance contain more truth than hours of managed conversation because they represent who she actually is, rather than who she thinks she needs to appear to be. The most profound leakage moments happen when she's helping others, dealing with emergencies, experiencing genuine surprise, or engaged in activities that require her complete attention. During these times, the energy normally devoted to self-monitoring gets redirected, creating windows of authentic response that reveal her true character. The transformation from being manipulated by female psychology to understanding female psychology represents one of the most profound shifts possible in male consciousness. When you stop taking her behaviour personally and start recognising the patterns beneath her behaviour, everything changes. This awakening doesn't make you cynical, it makes you empathetic. When you realise that her defensive behaviours aren't attacks on you, but protection mechanisms developed through years of emotional survival strategies, your entire perspective shifts from reactive to analytical. The anger you used to feel when she seemed irrational gets replaced by understanding that her responses make perfect sense when viewed through the lens of her psychological history. The frustration you experienced with her communication style transforms into appreciation for the complexity of navigating social survival as a woman. This recognition creates a fundamental shift in power dynamics. Instead of being confused and controlled by behaviours you couldn't understand, you begin to see the human being beneath the performance. You stop fighting her defences and start understanding why they exist. The ultimate paradox of learning to read women is that the ability to see through their psychological armour makes you more attracted to their authentic humanity, not less. When you understand that the performance is protection rather than deception, you develop patience for the gradual process of helping them feel safe enough to drop the performance entirely. If you're recognizing these patterns in the women around you and want to develop your ability to read human psychology at this level, subscribe to this channel for more insights into the hidden dynamics that govern every human interaction. Hit that notification bell, because understanding these patterns will transform not just your relationships with women, but your understanding of human nature itself. The 18 psychological truths I've revealed today aren't weapons to be used against women. They're tools for understanding the complex survival strategies that all humans develop to navigate a world that often punishes authentic vulnerability while demanding the appearance of authenticity. When you truly understand these patterns, something profound happens. You stop seeing women as mysterious and start seeing them as human. You stop being frustrated by their complexity and start being amazed by their resilience. You stop fighting their defenses and start appreciating the strength it takes to maintain such elaborate psychological protection systems. The smartest men who master the art of reading women eventually realize that the goal isn't to penetrate their defenses, it's to create environments safe enough that the defenses become unnecessary. True power doesn't come from your ability to see through someone's mask. It comes from your ability to help them feel secure enough to remove the mask voluntarily. The woman who seems impossible to read is usually just someone who's learned that being readable comes with costs she's not willing to pay. The mystery isn't inherent complexity, it's learned protection. The confusion isn't female nature, it's survival strategy. Understanding this transforms your relationship with every woman you encounter, because you stop trying to solve them like puzzles and start appreciating them as complex human beings doing their best to navigate the impossible balance between authenticity and acceptability in a world that often demands both simultaneously. The darkest truth about reading women isn't that they're manipulative or deceptive. It's that they're human beings wearing armor that was forged through experiences that taught them that being fully visible was dangerous. The greatest skill in human connection isn't learning to see through the armor, it's learning to help them feel safe enough to take it off. Share this video with any man who needs to understand that the complexity of women isn't a barrier to overcome, but a masterpiece to appreciate. The 18 patterns I've revealed today aren't about becoming a better manipulator. They're about becoming a better human being who understands that we're all wearing masks, and the most profound connections happen when those masks become unnecessary.